like I said, we can't ever know who's experienced trauma. And even if we could, it's kind of counterproductive in schools because kids are already labeled in a lot of ways. And when we start labeling kids with trauma, we really run the risk that we're going to create more hardship for them by giving them this label. Also, a lot of time kids don't know when they're going through trauma that that's what it is. Like, you yourself may have experienced, or you may know other people who went through something really hard in childhood and didn't quite realize until you were much older that what happened to you was not okay, or what happened was trauma. It looks different for everybody, so we just can't really know which kids are going through trauma or not. And really, in trauma-informed education, we want to transform everything about school so that it's a warmer and more caring place. And so in that regard, it doesn't really matter which kids have experienced trauma or not. We're making a lot of shifts. So from that lens, we would instead want to ask, how is trauma present in this school? So I'll give you an example. I'm working with a school in DC, and we were talking about trauma-informed education. When we started out, they were talking about some specific kids, a specific classroom that they said, we need some trauma-informed stuff for this kid. But then we shifted to asking this question of how is trauma present here? We did an activity that we're about to do. And when we did that activity, they started to think about how is trauma present in our community, among our teachers, just as a whole. And so some of the things that they recognized were there was trauma in their neighborhood. They are in a part of DC that has a lot of income inequality, and they were talking about how that presents real challenges among their student body and their families. They talked about how a few years ago, one of their staff had passed away during the school year, and they felt like they never really had a chance to process that or heal. And so the teachers were still kind of traumatized, even though the kids didn't necessarily know that staff member. And then they also were talking about how they're located in Capitol Hill. They're like a couple blocks from the Capitol. We were having this conversation in the summer of 2021. And so they talked about the insurrection, and they talked about how that day, January 6th, was really traumatic for their community. Their kids were all there when they locked down the area. There was emergency vehicles, and then all the conversations around it had really impacted their whole school. So when we talked about it in that way, right, if we were just saying, let's make a list of all the kids who are traumatized, we would never have talked about most of those things. But those were the things really impacting the whole school. And that's where we kind of had to start to make the environment more trauma-informed. So that's where we're going to start today as well. We're going to be doing an activity to look at this question of how is trauma present in our school? And can I get some volunteers to help pass these around? Thank you. And you can give to some here. So what you're going to get is this beautiful packet. This has a list of questions, which you can also find in the book, that go through some different ways that trauma and healing could be present in the school. So how is trauma in society impacting our school? How is historical or community trauma impacting? How are our teachers impacted or students? How are families and the caregivers of our students impacted? So you'll go through, you'll see questions like that. What you're going to do is first you're going to have a few minutes on your own to go through these questions and think about them personally. So you're going to have a few minutes to just write, take notes on here on your own. Then we're going to have some conversations in small groups as well. What I want to encourage you is when you're writing in here on your own, feel free to, jot down anything that comes to mind. When we get into small groups, I want to encourage you that if any of the things that came to mind were very specific stories about specific students, that you're not going to share those with people who don't already have that information, right? So like I know some of you are co-teachers or whatever, but you're not going to sit and go, well, trauma is present at my school because there's this one kid, and then tell their whole story of trauma, right? Because that's not really ours to share in the group. But you could share out some themes or some more general things. Does that make sense? So we're just being mindful of that kind of confidentiality. Okay, you're going to have 5 minutes first to work on this on your own quietly. but go ahead and you can get started.